Let us begin our story not with a bang, but with a sunrise. A slow, Virginia dawn. The light is pale and soft. It creeps across the Potomac River. The water moves quietly, a wide, silver ribbon in the early mist. On a hill above the river, a house sleeps. Its white wood and red roof are gentle against the green trees. This is Mount Vernon. For most of his life, this was the place George Washington called home. It was not a palace, but a working farm. Imagine the sounds. Not cannons, but birds. The low call of a crow. The rustle of leaves in a light breeze. The distant sound of an axe on wood. Washington loved this land. He walked its fields every morning. He watched the wheat grow. He planned orchards of apple and peach trees. He bred mules and hounds. His life here was a rhythm of seasons. Planting, tending, harvesting. The quiet work of making a home from the earth. His study in the house was a place of calm order. A large wooden desk. Neat stacks of paper. A globe by the window. Here, he wrote letters about crop rotation. About the price of tobacco. About the design of a new barn. The light from the window would fall across the floorboards, hour by hour, marking the passage of a peaceful day. Long before he was a general or a president, Washington was a young man with a compass. In his teens, he learned the art of surveying. This is a quiet profession. It requires patience. A careful eye. It is about knowing the land, inch by inch. He would travel into the wilderness of the Virginia frontier. Imagine him there. A tall, serious young man. His tools in his pack. A chain for measuring. A theodolite for sighting angles. He walked through forests of oak and pine. He waded across cold, clear streams. His work was to draw lines. To map boundaries where few maps existed. He listened to the forest. The crunch of leaves underfoot. The whisper of the wind in high branches. This time shaped him. It gave him a physical strength. A resilience against hardship. But more importantly, it gave him a deep understanding of the American continent. He saw its vastness. Its potential. He learned to read the landscape like a book. At night, he would camp under the stars. The firelight would flicker on his face as he noted the day's measurements in his journal. This was not a life of speeches or politics. It was a life of observation. Of silent, meticulous work. It was the foundation upon which everything else was built. Back at Mount Vernon, Washington's days followed a steady rhythm. He rose before the sun. In the cool, gray pre-dawn light, he would dress simply. Then he would ride out to inspect his farms. He had 5 separate farms on the estate. Each had its own overseer, its own workers, its own crops. He believed in innovation. He experimented with different fertilizers. He designed a revolutionary 16-sided barn for threshing wheat. Picture him on his horse, moving slowly along a fence line. He would stop to examine the soil, to check on a new foal, to watch the progress of his fishermen on the river. His home was always open. Visitors arrived constantly. The dining room at Mount Vernon was often full. The table would be set with simple, good food from the farm. The conversation was of farming, of science, of the news from other colonies. Martha Washington moved through these rooms with a calm grace. She managed a household of dozens. She oversaw the spinning of wool, the making of clothes, the preservation of food. In the evening, Washington might retire to the porch. The long, columned piazza facing the river. He would sit there as the light faded, watching the sails of ships on the Potomac become dark silhouettes. The crickets would begin their song. The fireflies would appear over the lawn. It was a life of deep, rooted contentment. A life built on the quiet management of land, of home, and of community. War came as it does. It took him away from his fields. But even in command, there were long stretches of quiet. Consider the winter at Valley Forge. We often think of the hardship, the cold, the hunger. But let us think of the stillness. The deep silence of a snow-covered camp. Thousands of log huts built into the Pennsylvania hills. Smoke curling slowly from chimneys into a gray winter sky. Washington's headquarters was a small stone house. Inside, the room would be warm from a fireplace. The general would spend hours at his desk, writing letters to Congress, pleading for supplies, writing to farmers, asking for food. The scratch of his quill was a constant sound. He walked through the camp daily. He moved among the soldiers without fanfare. A tall, blue-cloaked figure in the snow. He offered quiet encouragement. He saw the frost on the men's blankets. He heard the quiet coughs from the huts. His leadership here was not about brilliant charges. It was about endurance, about presence, about sharing the silence and the struggle. At night, he might look out his window, seeing the points of campfires glowing in the vast, dark woods. A constellation of human resilience on the frozen ground. It was a test of patience, a test of will, fought not with muskets in that moment, but with the quiet strength to wait for spring. The war ended. The nation called him again. He became president. He served in New York, then in Philadelphia. These were not capitals of grand palaces. The president's house was a large, rented home. It was a public and a private space. Every Tuesday, Washington held a public levee, a formal reception. He would stand in the drawing room, dressed in black velvet. Citizens would come to meet him. The events were stiff, quiet affairs, governed by strict rules of decorum. On other afternoons, he and Martha would take a carriage ride. A simple, daily ritual. They would drive through the streets, nodding to people. They were building the traditions of a republic, one quiet gesture at a time. In the evenings, they might host a small dinner. The conversation was light, deliberately avoiding politics. They spoke of books, of theater, of agricultural news. Washington missed his farm desperately. He wrote long, detailed letters to his farm manager at Mount Vernon, asking about the harvest, giving instructions for planting willow trees along the river. His heart was always in Virginia, in the soil, in the rhythm of the seasons he could not witness. The power he held was immense, yet he treated it as a heavy burden, a duty to be performed with gravity and then, hopefully, laid down. At last, his duty was done. Twice. He served 2 terms as president. And then, he did something the world found astonishing. He stepped away. He gave up power willingly. He returned to Mount Vernon. Imagine his journey home. The carriage rolling down the familiar drive. The dogs barking. The servants and family gathering on the lawn. He was finally home. He was just a farmer again. He threw himself into the work. He was up at dawn every day. He wrote, "I am now enjoying domestic ease under the shadow of my own vine and my own fig tree." He expanded the house. He redesigned the landscaping. He created a gentle, rolling lawn down to the river. He walked for hours. He visited each farm. He watched the sun set from his piazza. His days were full of these small, profound pleasures. The feel of a well-made tool. The sight of a field of clover in bloom. The company of his grandchildren. He lived only a few years after his retirement. But they were years of deep satisfaction, of quiet fulfillment. The greatest leader of his age had chosen, in the end, the simple life of a country gentleman. His final act was not one of war or politics. It was the peaceful closing of a long day's work. Washington passed away quietly, in his own bed at Mount Vernon. It was a December evening. The house was still. His final thoughts were of instructions for his will and care for those who had served him. His body was laid to rest in a simple tomb on the grounds. A vault built into a hillside, overgrown with ivy. It is a quiet, shaded place. The noise of history moved on, but his example remained. A reminder that true strength can be gentle, that leadership can be a service, not a conquest, that the greatest power sometimes lies in the choice to walk away, to go home. Today, Mount Vernon still looks over the Potomac. The trees are older. The floors creak with the memory of his footsteps. Visitors walk the paths he designed. They stand on the piazza and see the same river view. They feel the peace he worked so hard to cultivate. It is a legacy not just of battles won or a nation founded. It is a legacy of calm purpose, of quiet devotion to place and principle. A reminder that after the storm of public life, there can be a gentle return, a peaceful sleep in the land he loved. And so, as our story ends, picture that river, forever flowing, the White House on the hill, silent and steadfast, a sentinel of quiet strength under the endless, turning sky.